Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. As always, we're here to keep you up to date with the latest news, tech, content and wisdom from the world of marketing. And as always, my co-host is a man on a mission to demystify digital marketing. He's the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome Mr. Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you so much. Let me introduce you to a man who's also on a mission to keep marketing simple, the voice of the marketing and finance podcast and the host of the Roger video series. I give you Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, fantastic. And here we are, Pascal, with episode 44.
I know.
Fantastic. So, without further ado, I think we should dive straight into the news.
Almost 9 in 10 UK employees would prefer a fully flexible approach to returning to work and be given the choice to work remotely whenever they wish, according to a survey from the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, the IPA.
MTV has partnered with the environmental charity Global Action Plan to launch a digital campaign to inspire young people to believe in a more sustainable future, and it's called Flickers of the Future.
Marks & Spencer may have recorded over £201 million group loss during the pandemic. However, the retailer is celebrating an exceptional period thanks to its partnership with online supermarket Ocado.
The UK reaches critical mass of homegrown AI companies with over 600% growth over the last 10 years. 1,300 companies purportedly focus on AI with a turnover of $2 billion.
Wow, well, Legoland Windsor Resort has launched an augmented reality experience, creating using 𝗧𝗵𝗲 technology. The AR feature has been added to the resort's app as part of the opening of Lego Mythica, World of Mythical Creatures.
Pepsi says it's better with burgers in a shot across Coke's bow. Their CEO says we're going to put a stake in the ground and prove that all burgers go better with Pepsi and give everyone the chance to try Pepsi with their favourite burger.
Twitter is introducing the much requested undo tweet button, but only as part of its new subscription service, Twitter Blue.
And finally, TikTok just gave itself permission to collect biometric data on US users, including face prints and voice prints. So Pascal, what do you think about a subscription version of Twitter, given that it's been free for, at least 12 years now?
I'm not sure. And the reason for that, Roger, is that because we have little news and little kind of information about Twitter Blue. It was announced, I think, a few weeks ago now. We've not seen it in action. The promises are around some news that only you can access using your Twitter Blue account and other features. But it's just very light in information. Now, you could argue it's a micro payment. They are talking about $2-3 a month, if that. But it feels very mean that this idea of editing and controlling your tweets would only be available to those who are paying for it.
Yeah, there's certainly been very, very little information, and to be honest, apart from the undo button, and I think there's something about different forms of lists and things that you can create, which I have to say didn't get me very excited, but they are being very, very secretive about it. Now, I'm a little bit torn as to whether you need an undo button. I mean, there's frequently times when I've tweeted something and realised that I've spelt a name wrong or something, and effectively have to delete the tweet and retype it. So I guess for something like that, it would be useful, but they're always going to have to be putting a time limit on it, because otherwise people would just be going back in time to edit tweets. Say if they tweet something wrong or something, they just go back and edit it. So yeah, I think we need, as you say, a lot more information on what Twitter Blue is going to be, and maybe it'll be that sacred blue tick that everybody seems to aspire to.
What is interesting is Twitter has looked into introduced things like the tipping jar and ways in which you can reward creators. I think it's mostly rolled out in the US for now. But it's back to this idea of not misinformation, under communication is a term I was looking for here. This idea of you get me reasonably interested or intrigued about this announcement, but there's nothing behind it. And got to be careful with communication, particularly nowadays where it is much faster than it used to be. You've got to give people the full picture. picture, or they start to reach their own conclusions. So actually, in general, it's just been a rather negative reaction saying, well, why should I have to pay to control my tweets? And by the way, we ask for edit tweet, not undo tweet, and so on. So you end up with more of that going on online than the sense of excitement.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound as if they've actually listened to what the customer base is asking for here. So I thought we'd talk about that Legoland app, which sounds absolutely incredible. Legoland Windsor, which is a stone's throw from Heathrow Airport. So if anybody fancies going there, it's very close by to Heathrow, so you can't miss it. But I actually watched a guy do a video on this very subject, this Mythica world of mythical creatures. Actually, maybe he should have been a content spotlight. He runs a channel called Theme Park Worldwide. Now, it just looks incredible the way they've grafted this in. Now, admittedly, you have to walk around with your app, but it's obviously activated by GPS or something when you walk through the tunnels of this part of the resort, and things flash up on the screen like the great big monsters and the dinosaur type creatures, and obviously you've got information about them, and it really does seem to graft into the actual surrounding area really well.
I think for me, it's kind of interesting. Lego as a brand has always been ahead on many things, such as product design, marketing campaigns, and so on. I will confess, when the resort opened, I'm going to say late 90s, early 2000s, I was a bit perplexed as to why people want to walk around looking at Lego bricks and so on and so forth. But I know there's a strong following. There's even a TV show that you can catch on cable of people competing by building all sort of contraptions using Lego bricks. But this idea of how do we keep, the audience engaged, how do we secure the goodwill for future generation? I think that's a very, very smart move.
Yeah, and there's one thing I've always wondered about the Lego Resort, and I mean, I've never been there, but you obviously see it in videos, as I've said, is, for example, the Eiffel Tower or the Houses of Parliament, which they have models of there. Are they actually literally built from individual Lego bricks, or is it really just a great big con? In fact, they've got a great big moulded Eiffel Tower with the little ridges on it, but actually it's one huge Eiffel Tower shaped piece of plastic with Lego bits sort of moulded into it, or is it genuinely Lego bricks? I just don't know.
I just have this image of Lego fans listening to this or watching it, just reeling in horror as Roger Edwards is suggesting that people are cheating. I do believe that it's every single brick, and in fact that's the appeal, isn't it? Some of the what has been built is gigantic, and there's thousands upon thousands of bricks.
Yeah, so I apologise to any Lego fans out there. Please feel free to throw Lego at the screen as we continue to talk about in the news. So Pascal, the other one I wanted to talk about today was this artificial intelligence. Now, I was actually quite shocked to find that there are 1,300 companies in the UK with that combined turnover of $2 billion purportedly in the AI space. Now, interestingly enough, a friend of mine, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, who's been a shout out on the show before, he did tweet this fact, and he just said, I don't believe that all of these companies are genuinely about AI. They may just be doing a bit of computer programming and calling it AI. Gosh, I'm sounding cynical today, aren't I? But I don't mean to be. But I just wonder, that seems to me to be a hell of a lot of companies in the AI space.
I disagree, Roger. I think that's an okay number. That's rather modest. But I think you're right about challenging what we mean by artificial intelligence. Are we confusing sometimes just simply good computing and good kind of data crunching? Are we confusing business intelligence, BI? So there's all sort of thing going on there. But if we are generally looking at, I suppose, based on last week's episode of AI to help you make better decisions, and if you think about the history for the last few decades of the UK leading the way when it comes to computing, when it comes to health, when it comes to satellite and space exploration, and so on, I think that's about right in my view.
Yeah, it probably is. It just made me wonder. It was that little thing about, is it AI or is it?
I think that's a fair point.
Computer
and I think also, forgive me, Roger, there could be a lot of startups in there that sadly may not last, or where investors have gone in to try and get into the AI bandwagon, but it just won't last. But it's a good thing because, when it comes to the UK, we are missing out a lot on EU-wide initiative when it comes to AI. Do you remember that recently Europe launched their program of next generation computer, including the quantum computer? And I was a bit worried that UK would be left behind. So yeah, maybe there's a bit of good news there.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on, Pascal. Lots of news items to talk about, but we do have other sections of the show to get through. So shall we move on now to the content spotlights? In this section of the show, Pascal and I bring to the table an item of content that's caught our attention over the last week. Now, it could be an article, could be a video, could be a podcast. The main thing is it's caught our attention for a marketing reason. So, Pascal, what have you got for me this week?
So this week, it's an article from headliner.app. This is the second time I think that I bring some of their content. Headliner would be known as the audiogram creator company, where you can go online and repurpose some of your video and audio content into static images, but with the kind of sound playing with the sound waves. And I received an email about a few days ago asking the question, do you have a podcast media kit? And the answer was yes, but no. What I mean to say is that I knew what a media kit is. In fact, I will confess that I love a good media kit. That must be from my background in marketing in the 90s and the 80s. Do you know that I also teach what I call the media CV, to be able to become a guest on podcast, videocast, and blogger? If I'm not mistaken, you were one of the beta tester of the new template. So I kind of thought, well, I kind of have it, but do I? But also I was thinking that could be a lovely way for me to supplement what I teach people by adding a few things. So I clicked on the link, and sure enough, I went on the blog written by someone called Megan. So I'd love to be able to give that individual a good shout out. So if anyone a headliner is listening, give us more about Megan. All we have is a first name. We don't have a profile or anything like this. But the title of the full article is as follows: How to Create a Podcast Media Kit with Examples. It's a long form article, which I think is lovely. There are some examples, both visuals, and it's structured, as you would expect, as a very good article with why you should bother with the podcast media kit, what should be included, and how to use it. I would also say, like I did last time when I used a content from Headliner, that whilst this is called a podcast media kit, the information will be valid for a video blog media kit or a blog media kit, because ultimately you're there to find ways to promote your podcast, to pitch yourself as a guest, but also the reason why a media kit is also helpful. It's a great exercise to really make sure that your thinking is well organized and that you're truly committed to this series. I'm going to go straight into the what should be included in your media kit, and you're going to see some obviously correlation with my media CV model. There's some extras in there which I think are very interesting. So first thing you should do, now remember this would be something shared with others. You should have obviously the full kind of content information elements, not forgetting social media accounts and so on. And in that, they also suggest be sure that your social media accounts are kept up to date. So, for example, you may have spent quite a bit of time on LinkedIn and you may have neglected Facebook, which can happen. Don't hesitate to remove Facebook from your media kit for a period of time. And the argument that Megan makes, that is your media kit, is something that is alive, that should be updated on a regular basis. So don't hesitate to add, but also take out. So you should also put a personal biography, but the biography should be a lot more around you as a content creator or as a podcast host or co-host, as opposed to your product and services, which I think makes sense. Then there should be a show summary. And she's advocating the old PR adage of the who, what, where, when, and why, which I think makes a lot of sense. And starting with who is it for? What are you covering? Where do you tend to record and publish the information? When is it published? And why are you creating this series? And the why is sometimes so hard, isn't it, Roger?
Absolutely.
Now,
I mean, this makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Perfect sense. I'm sitting here thinking we haven't really got this for this show, have we?
We have it, but not committed to a document. And
Yes.
this is where the show summary, I've learned something new thanks to Megan. Now, typically, I would ask people to put together a great-looking PDF, often using Canva. But she's saying, why don't you make it a podcast? She should think, well, yeah, of course we should. Why don't you make it very visual, almost like a infographic? Why don't you make it a video? So that in 90 seconds, you could summarize and you can make it, animated video. You don't have to be the one talking by all means, but something like almost a behind the scenes with narrations. So I have to say, I thought the show summary element of the what should be in it was very, very inspiring. And there are some examples. Then you want to prove to others that, of course, you are not only a good host if you're looking for guests, but you can also be a good guest. So make sure you provide links to your shows, publish on other platforms than your own, which I think is very important. This could be directories, this could be someone else's blog, and so on and so forth. And where possible, why don't you embed the episodes published in other directories onto this media kit, making life much easier for everybody. Have testimonials. So if you've received well dones and thank yous on social media, if you've had some compliments from your guest and from your host, make sure they are included in there as well. If you have them, have some stats and some matrix. Now, it's not for everybody, depending on which sector you operate and what dashboard you're using, but those could include also, which comes next, awards and recent press releases. So if you've had a shout out about your podcast, don't hesitate to make sure that it is part of the media kit. And finally, if you're offering the option for people to advertise on your podcast, or in my case, video series and or blog, then have all the specs and information for people to take action. Then finally, the article goes into 5 ways to use your media kit. I shall leave that pleasure for people to follow the link below the show notes and follow that. But I wanted to focus on what should be in the media kit. And I think this checklist is amazing.
This is so good, Pascal. And again, every week in 44 episodes, we've talked about a film. And you can guarantee that all of those films will have had their own media kits. Yeah. I've been involved in numerous product launches over my career in big corporate, and I've helped clients as a marketing consultant launch products. And yes, you always put together a media kit. It's absolutely obvious that you should be doing this for a podcast as well. But it's like a lot of things, isn't it? You need that reminder, that bit of a kick. And then sometimes you just need somebody to tell you, this is the sort of things that you should be putting in it. Now, it might seem like the obvious, but what you've gone through there today, it makes me realize, I do this for the Marketing and Finance podcast, but not all of those bits. So again, I'll be going away after this just to go through my own media kit, or web page as it's more likely to be called, and making sure that I've got all of those things included.
So once again, big thank you to Megan, whoever you are at Headliner. It's been a wonderful reminder. And to your point, Roger, as we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of Two Geeks, that could also be a lovely exercise to go through to capture all that information.
Yeah, because we've got the testimonials, we've got the feedback, we've got the photographs, we've got the outtakes as well. There could even be an outtakes part of the media
very
kit,
true.
couldn't there?
That's very, very true. So what about yourself, Roger? What have you discovered on the interweb?
Okay, well, let me just give you a little bit of background first of all. This is a little bit of a story. There's been a couple of occasions whilst I've been bringing up my son when I've got a bit annoyed with his school, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 University. And both of those occasions are related to him writing a piece of content. Now, the example at school was he was writing an essay, and it was a creative essay, but he got picked up by his teacher for using short sentences and using short paragraphs. So he actually lost marks, and that instilled in him this belief that paragraphs have to be long and sentences have to be long. Indeed, quite soon after that, he wrote another essay, and his paragraphs were almost like the entire page. And his sentences, you had to take a huge deep breath before you tried to actually say them out loud. And I was, the marketing person in me, and the person who's obsessed with simplicity, as you know, is just wanting to edit this back down to the simple version. But oh no, Dad, if I do that, I'll lose marks. And I always remember that, Pascal. And then even more recently, and now my son is a grown man. He's away at university. He's in his 5th year doing an architecture degree. He had to write a dissertation at 10,000 words. And once again, he said to me, Dad, would you have a read through it? Now, I thought the content was really good, Pascal, and obviously I'm incredibly proud of what he's written. But there were occasions where I'm thinking, this is really complicated language, and it's also hard to read in places because the paragraphs are so long and the sentences are so long. But once again, I was reminded this is the way of academia, and he would lose marks if he actually thinned it down. Now, you and I, we as marketers, we encourage people when they're writing content, especially writing content, short sentences, short paragraphs, keeps people's attention. That just made me think, and that's why I've chosen this week's content spotlight, because the headline of this article in Entrepreneur magazine is 3 lies they tell you at school that hurt you in business.
Okay.
And this is by a guy called Samuel Leeds. So at least I have got the full name for this gentleman. And it's a relatively short article, so it's in keeping with what I've just said there. And I read this and I thought, this is absolutely true, that we spend so much time teaching our kids to do the wrong things for when they get out into the real world. And a lot of those children will either never unlearn those bad habits because they have been drummed into them whilst they're at school, or it will take a long time to get them to unlearn it. So the 3 things that Samuel says is, the first one you're taught not to do at school is don't copy other people. Now, again, I can remember that. You'd be writing an essay, and who hasn't had a furtive glance over at the person next to you to see if you can copy their answer or whatever it is, and you get slammed down by the teacher. What are you doing, boy? Or maybe not quite like that these days, but it's just bad. You just do not copy. But what he's saying is that in the real world, why wouldn't you? If somebody is being successful, somebody has a successful product, go and copy it within the boundaries of patents and that sort of thing, and improve upon it and use it as the basis for moving forward. So again, that's one of those things that's drummed into kids, which actually doesn't set them up well for the real world. The second one, and again, I'm nodding vigorously even as I read this for the second time, is you've got to learn everything before you try to do something. And when I was at school, all of our exams, all of our qualifications were exam driven. So we would spend 2 years learning the syllabus, and then we would do an exam at the end of that, and it would all be on the exam. I suppose at least today they do have a sort of assessment as you go type of thing as well as the exams. But again, it instills this thing into your head that you've got to have done everything you can before you actually try to implement the knowledge. And what that means is when you go into the real world, you procrastinate because you can't possibly know everything that you need to know before you try something. So you've always got this sort of little demon sat on your shoulder saying, you shouldn't try and implement that project because you haven't got all the information you need. You shouldn't try launching that product because you haven't got everything sorted out. I even remember having a conversation with one of my bosses when I was fairly senior, and he was sort of saying, can you 100% guarantee that you will hit this market share? And I'm saying, no, you can't. You can't get 100% there. But he was absolutely adamant. So in the end, I thought, we just had to lie. Yeah, okay, we'll get 100%, knowing full well that we wouldn't. So you've got to unlearn that. You've got to just do stuff. Just do it. Try it. And move on. And I guess that leads into number 3. And there are only 3, Pascal. And this one is that it's bad to make mistakes. Oh, God, how many times? Spelling mistakes, bad news, slap on wrist. Get a sum wrong. 1 out of 10, very poor performance. Make mistakes, it's bad, bad, bad. And that it can damage people's mental health for years and years, that whole don't make mistakes. And yet you then go out into the real world and you don't try stuff for fear of making a mistake. But as you and I know, in business, that's probably one of the best ways to learn, and one of the best ways to innovate is you try something, and what doesn't work, you either take it away or refine it and make it better. So, honestly, it was almost like a little blow my mind moment. So Samuel Leeds, thank you for that. Short article, only 3 things. Don't copy, learn everything before you do it, and don't make mistakes. But wow, we spend so much time being indoctrinated with these things at school that we then have to find ways of unlearning them so that we can be prepared for the real business world as we grow up.
And you've got to hope for the younger people who are soon to go into the world of work that they're going to have an enlightened employer who understands that's the case. When I have trainees learning about content marketing, we talk about it. I'd say, you need to find a way to we can all support each other, but let go of that, being right first time, which comes from school. To your point about getting the grades, you get, you lose points each time you make a mistake. You even lose points if you try and deviate from the brief because you're trying to be a bit more creative. But to your point about making mistakes, I remember meeting an organization, a software company, and in conversation, the MD revealed that this was his 3rd attempt to make a software company work. And this one, he was doing it right because of all the lessons of the past. And it's just, we are now where we are when it comes to particularly my specialism of digital marketing. You've got to experiment. You've got to be curious. Only this morning, I was interviewing somebody for my podcast about PowerPoint and how there are now so many features and facets of PowerPoint, but people don't know about them because they've lost the knack of being inquisitive. Because, of course, once you know how to use something, let's not deviate from that comfort zone just in case I make some mistakes. So, I think it's a great choice, and it's very, very telling, but also a very important message for both employers. I do believe that they have to almost re-educate the younger workforce because they have to move on from the environment of education, but also would have more respect for the university and the college if they told your son, listen, the way you write is going to be brilliant in the private sector, but for the purpose of taking the exam or for the purpose of your dissertation, we favor this format. But I don't think that's been the case.
No, absolutely not. It's almost like it's bad to write in that way, and that's definitely not one. I mean, just imagine that example you gave there of the gentleman who'd taken 3 times to launch this software business. Imagine if he'd given up after the first attempt. We're now about to move on to the content, to the marketing apps and tech section of the show. Imagine if half of the people had given up after their first attempt. We wouldn't have as many amazing apps and amazing pieces of technology to review and to celebrate. So this is very, very important. So please do check these pieces of content out today. Shall we then move on to marketing tech and apps, Pascal?
Let's do that.
In this part of the show, Pascal and I bring to the table a piece of technology. It could be an app, it could be some software, it could be a website, and we look at its value to marketers and content creators. So Pascal, hit me with your tech.
Right, so 2 days ago, Roger, I had the pleasure of attending online the annual conference organized by Facebook called F8 with a theme of refresh and restart. So it was very tempting for me, Roger, to put this into the content spotlight, but I thought we'll change it. And in fairness, the article from Headliner was so exciting, I chose to go for that. But within the conference, so once again, very similar to the Google I/O conference, which spoke about a week or so ago, this is a 2 to 3 day event. Now completely virtual. I mean, they're hoping that next year they can be back to doing the big event in a big stage and so on. And what was interesting is normally every year there's a sense of excitement about the many announcements, the many reveals, almost like a Hollywood blockbuster. And this was not the case. What was interesting, Roger, this year, it was more a question of we've done a lot to create some new features and new products, particularly in 2019, 2020. And very politely and diplomatically, we are asking you to make full use of them before we keep adding new stuff, which I thought was very interesting. So there's almost nothing new to report within reason, but there were two key messages in addition to go deeper and use the platform to its full. The first app I wanted to mention or remind people is the Facebook Business Suite. Now, people may know it as the Facebook Manager or Facebook Pay Manager, but they've done a lot to improve its use, and they are kind of very proud of what they call the desktop version. So if you're not familiar, the Facebook Business Suite is the ultimate dashboard that allows you to manage really all your activities on Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger, saving you a mountain of time, but also they have integration with third-party software that you may not be aware of. So in addition to reminding you about Facebook Business Suite, it's also a recommendation, which is essentially the key message of the Facebook conference, to spend some time to reacquaint yourself with the dashboard or to learn how to use it for the first time. I mean, looking at my notes, you can view at a glance all your activities. You can use their really clever inbox to keep track of all the correspondence as opposed to answering within each of the separate apps. You could also automate replies if you're going to be away. They have a more tools section with all the third-party integration, which could include your website, could include your Shopify website, and so on, and more. So the Facebook Business Suite, I think it's essential for anyone who is using Facebook to market their business to really become comfortable with all of it, as opposed to use it in a superficial way. The second key message of the conference, Roger, was the rise of online messaging. They have stats which they share, they have cases which they've shared during the conference, whereby messaging using Messenger, using Instagram messaging, as well as WhatsApp, is becoming now the number one choice for many individuals who are not even bothering going onto your website or even your main Facebook page or your main Instagram account, which I think is very, very telling. As a result of which, they're introducing new animations, new ways to signpost people with drop-down menus and animated menus. They have also integration with lots of apps you would expect, and they're also introducing a better video meeting and messaging and better ways to integrate AR and AI within that. So Facebook Business Messaging is what I've called it. I put the links below, but once again, they are recommending, and I'm recommending, that you start to read and watch and learn how to use messaging for your business more and better, using both yourself as a human being, but also the use of AI and machine learning, because the case studies and the stats they share, Roger, were clear. You're going to get more sales, you're going to get more inquiries if you use messaging as part of your marketing.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny, Pascal. I've noticed literally over the last couple of weeks, more people coming to me via Facebook Messenger.
Is that right?
Yeah, just complete coincidence. Now, a long time ago, I experimented with almost like it's like a Facebook Messenger bot that you can create that answers generic questions that people might type in, and I think I experimented with it for a while and then decided it wasn't really for me. And funnily enough, somebody must have somehow activated one of the decision tree type arrangements that I'd set up, because they came into Messenger, and it was actually applying to be a podcast guest. That was right, and they'd come in and they'd gone through it just like I'd set it up 3 or 4 years ago, and oh, look, that's interesting. And then literally the following day on WhatsApp as well, because recently I put the WhatsApp button onto my Facebook page, and somebody came to me through that as well. So you're absolutely right, and I really love the way that you're focusing in on these big conferences. A, I'd never heard of the conferences myself, but B, you're obviously picking up some really good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Now, ultimately, a lot of the information is addressing developers, people who program AI. But if you're patient, you're going to pick up such good snippets of, and for me, it's almost Facebook sharing their business plan and giving you the heads up of where the investment is. And right now, Roger, they are investing in business messaging and in the Facebook Business Suite. So we should, take part as well.
Good stuff. So I'll tell you about my pieces of tech for this week. Actually, the first one's a website. Now, this week, one of my friends posted on his Facebook, and the post was something like, Facebook have changed the algorithm, and in fact, Facebook only ever show you the top 25 of your friends. No matter how many friends you've got, you'll only see posts from 25 people. This is a really bad thing that the algorithm does, and you need to go into the settings and you need to change the settings to this. Please share this with as many of your friends as possible so that we can stop Facebook doing this. And I read this and I thought, okay, this is a scam that's been going on for many years now. And unfortunately, my friend has fallen for it and he's put it on his page. And so I typed in and I said, sorry, Andy, but this is a really old falsehood, scam, a bleak rumor about Facebook. It isn't true. It's never been true. Yes, they do change the algorithm, but this specific thing is almost like a viral chain letter that does the rounds from time to time. And I typed this out and I posted it, and then I actually read all the other comments below his original post, and about 5 other people had said the same thing. Andy, for goodness sake, this is something that has been going around for years. And there are loads of these sort of scams. There's another one which says that there are 5 Fridays in August, and this only happens like once every 400 years, and wow, isn't that amazing? Well, if you fact check it, you'll find that actually most years contain a month that has 5 Fridays in it, so it's not something that only happens once every 400 years. There's a fabulous website, and that's my first marketing tech shout out. It's called Snopes.com. snopes.com, Snopes, and it's basically a fact-checking website, but they specialize in these sort of social media rumors, social media scams, whatever you want to call them, that go flying around from time to time. So if you do see somebody post something like my friend had posted, rather than just copying and pasting it like they say and putting it out to all your friends, it's always worth checking it out on Snopes, because Snopes will tell you whether it's true or whether it's a false rumor that you should actually avoid. So, and there's also some really fascinating things on Snopes as well from all sorts of different industries. There's one big rumor that went round at the United States about 10 years ago that people were waking up having met a lady or a gentleman in a bar, having a few drinks, passing out and waking up in a bath full of ice the following morning.
That urban legend.
That urban legend. Now, again, that does the rounds from time to time, and Snopes will tell you that is an urban legend, and you aren't actually waking up in a bath of ice because somebody's harvested one of your organs. So definitely check out Snopes.com. The second shout out, and I've done Restream.io before on the show, but I wanted to give them another shout out this week because they are continually evolving this live streaming platform and giving people more and more and more value. Now, as you know, I do my pre-recorded videos, which I upload to my YouTube channel, the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 series, and I use a system called Epidemic Sound for some of the incidental music. It's copyright-free music. Now, yes, I could use that if I did a live stream, but it would be a little bit awkward because I'd have to have it playing in Windows Media Player or iTunes or something like that, and I'd have to feed the sound into the video feed and all of that. Restream this week have just launched their own inbuilt copyright-free music selection widget. So if you are doing a live broadcast, they will give you all of these buttons, and you can choose different genres: rock, hip-hop, classical, mood music, film style music, and literally you just choose what you want and press the button and it plays, and you can adjust the volume, you can adjust the settings, and it plays in the background. So again, it's just those little tiny things, isn't it? I mean, you could be doing in the news section, like like we're doing in this show, and you just click a button and play some news-style music in the background. It's just those little things that make you look a little bit more professional and a little bit more polished. And now you can do it inside the Restream app, so it's no more messing around with, different players on your PC or your Mac. So hats off to Restream to continually upgrading their system and giving people more features.
That's lovely, and you're right. It is part of the what we want to do with the marketing tech and app segment is to revisit when there's something exciting to mention. So, I mean, the first one, I really like the idea. I would also use it, and I might try give it that pressure test around stats and data. You and I in marketing and in digital marketing, the stats galore, and sometimes you kind of go, is it true? And you try and do your due diligence by following the links. Is it true that 89% of people said the following? And you can never find the source in a reliable way. And what people tend to do on blog articles, they just copy and paste the same kind of stat over and over again. And then with this one, it's just a lovely idea because it's almost what I've been trying to play with the Rodecaster Pro using Ecamm Live, but everything's been simplified. It's one interface. Are you able, I'm not sure that you had the chance to play, but are you able to literally control the volumes? You could fade in and fade down the music as you're doing the live streaming. Brilliant.
Yeah, no, you can do that as well. No, it's really good. It's really good. So well done to Restream.io. But as you always say, Pascal, we wouldn't be where we are today if people in the past hadn't dedicated themselves to creating some of this technology and some of this content that we enjoy so much. So with that in mind, shall we load up the DeLorean? Shall we fire up the flux capacitor, set the controls of the TARDIS, and let's head back in time for this week in history.
In 1934, audiences enjoy the first appearance of Donald Duck in a cartoon entitled The Wise Little Hen at the Radio City Music Hall in New York City.
In 1949, George Orwell published his book about a dystopian future, 1984. This was the author's 9th and final book, which he completed during his lifetime.
In 1977, Apple Computer Incorporated ships its Apple II computer, the first in a long line of related computers. The original model, Roger, cost $1,298 and came with 4 kilobytes of RAM.
4 kilobytes, crikey. In 1982, Steven Spielberg's blockbuster E.T. the Extraterrestrial was released in theatres, and it's wildly seen as an American classic.
In 1987, Margaret Thatcher becomes the first Prime Minister in 160 years to win third consecutive term.
My goodness. And in 1987, New Zealand's Labour government legislates against nuclear weapons and nuclear-powered vessels in New Zealand. They're the only nation to legislate against nuclear power.
In 1993, Jurassic Park, directed by Spielberg again, starring Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum and many others, opens in over 2,400 cinemas in the US and sets box office weekend record of $502 million.
And in 2007, the Sopranos series finale takes place on HBO with its infamous cut to black ending. So once again, we've got a few films in our news section here, Pascal.
And thank you for choosing my hero twice. We've talked about E.T. and Jurassic Park. Interesting how I read the money in billions because we're in 2020. And of course, in the 90s, it was still millions, but still not bad.
No, I mean, yeah. Spielberg has been and done so many amazing films. Funnily enough, I was watching a scene from Jaws on YouTube last night that I just came across by accident. But yeah, Jurassic Park was. I remember really looking forward to that because I'd actually read the book by Michael Crichton, and I always thought Michael Crichton was an interesting author because he had that knack of writing about technology and making it sound incredibly plausible, even if the idea was complete nuts. And I think in his book that they'd actually taken the DNA of dinosaurs out of flies that had been preserved in globules of amber. And I was just thinking at the time, it sounds plausible, but of course it's absolute and utter hokum. But he just had that ability to present it. But what a great film Jurassic Park was, and I can't believe that it's 1993.
It feels like an ancient film to be talking about. Indeed, I might, suggest that it should be part of the film marketing at some stage. But the reason why, let's be careful, we're going to talk about it in film marketing some days, but the marketing campaign as well was very, very clever, bringing all the lessons learned from Jaws to E.T. to whatever's doing. And what a contribution to the world of cinema. But with his work, there's always a sense of adventure. It's just wonderful to watch.
Yeah. And 1984. Now, 1984 came and went. Mm-hmm. I was still quite young in the real 1984, but I remember reading George Orwell's book just after I left school, maybe when I was at university, and it's a genuinely scary book. And I think that as I've got older, and as the real 1984, the year, has faded into history, and we head into 2021, 2022, we see so many things happening in the world with governments now, and the suppression of free speech starting to happen in certain areas, and you just think, this book, was about a dystopian future, and to a certain extent we could be heading there still.
Quite. It's referred to when you watch documentaries, like the one I mentioned last week about AI and so on. So between 1984 and Brazil, a different film altogether. But for me, what is even more impressive is that George Orwell wrote this in 1949.
Yeah.
What could he see coming around the future? Because 1949, we're just coming out of the Second World War. We are rebuilding, obviously, Western Europe in some stages. He was joining the dots for us on our behalf way before there was any signs that we could all read that things could go work against us. So I think it's just an impressive way of, and what a gift, because people still talk about this book to this day.
Yeah, and again, it's almost like an alarm bell, isn't it? We should read 1984 and realise that these things can happen. I know there's loads of dystopian future novels out there. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley is one that springs to mind. The Handmaid's Tale, I guess, that's Margaret Atwell. That's another dystopian future. They always felt a little bit more fantastical, whereas I always thought that George Orwell's one, again, it was a bit like we were saying with Michael Crichton. It was plausible, and I see so many things happening at the moment which happened in 1984, the book, and sometimes it does scare me. Apple computers, Pascal, and a whopping 4 kilobytes of RAM. I nearly said kilograms there. Kilobytes of RAM. Wow. I remember when I was younger, I was just coming out of school, and I was trying to convince my mum and dad to buy me a Commodore PET. Now, I think that would probably have been more like about 1981, 1982. And I don't think they were as expensive as £1,200, $1,200. But the PET came with 8 kilobytes of RAM, which I thought was fantastic. But wow, crikey, that's about the size of a one-page Word document now, isn't it?
Nowadays, yes. What is crazy is that if you bought a more recent MacBook Pro with the M1 chip and probably to the tune of 8 gigabyte, that's the same price.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some law, isn't there, that microprocessing capacity exponentially rises. It's not the Peter principle, that's something else, but it's something like that. But it's incredible, and that's why I love this part of the show so much. It's just looking back and thinking, wow, think how excited we used to get about 4K of memory, and now we just blink and miss the fact that most iPhones and most Android phones probably have something like 512 gigabytes of storage in them. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible, and I think we definitely should always continue to celebrate these past achievements, because these past achievements are upon which our current world is built. Pascal, I think we should probably move on and talk about some creators a little bit closer to home and a little bit more contemporary. What do you think?
Let's do that.
Let's move on to creator shoutouts. In this part of the show, Pascal and I give shout-outs to our creator friends, usually people from our immediate network, sometimes slightly outside. So, Pascal, who is your shout-out this week?
So today in the spotlight, I wanted to introduce you to Judy Parsons. Now, Judy is a LinkedIn trainer and consultant. She's been really, for years now, banging the drum about how to use LinkedIn smartly, not spammy, using for lead generation, for building your reputation. And she shared so many nuggets of information, always keeping you informed of the latest development with the platform. But more recently, she has become the host of a live video series. She's called LinkedIn Lovin'. And what she does is the second Wednesday of every month, she interviews somebody using LinkedIn in new and innovative way to become a source of inspiration to others. I think it's wonderful. I think Judy's been such a great source of information for all of us, but she's now also bringing the network. So I did ask her permission to mention the show that I think the first one would be is eminent, but also how did you come up with a name? Now, what she did explain is that before the pandemic, she used to be out and about, like all of us, sharing obviously her words of wisdom about the LinkedIn, how to use it. But also what she was saying, it was all about sharing the LinkedIn love, because in some circles, LinkedIn is getting a bit of a bad press. People say it's tired, people say it's stuffy. Unfortunately, people are overusing the messaging bit to spam your inbox and so on. So she wants to do it the other way and help you find your dream client. Then she moved on to doing webinars. But again, she missed that interaction, that conversation. So she's now flipped it completely. And the LinkedIn Lovin' is now in conversation with others using the platform. And she's just, being the host. And I think it's wonderful. And again, it's a new series being launched very, very soon. So Judy Parsons is today my shout out.
Fantastic. And Pascal, my shout out is also LinkedIn related, which is a surprise. Now, last week in the tech section, I mentioned LinkedIn have just introduced these video profile videos that you can put in 30 seconds introducing who you are. They've also recently started rolling out a new form of profile. Now, most profiles are standard business profiles, and they show how many connections you've got and your job history if you've put it in. It'll also show what your last few posts have been and your interactions, like if you've answered a query or answered a question or posted on somebody else's post. They've recently been rolling out a new type of profile, which is called a creator profile. And that actually focuses in more on content creators. And it changes the way that you look on LinkedIn. So the connections box disappears and it's replaced by follow. So instead of connect, it's follow. And instead of the number of connections that you've got, it actually shows you how many followers you've got. And the idea is that this showcases content creators. So instead of just showing you whether you've posted an answer to somebody's question or something like that, it literally just puts in your posts, your videos, and your content. So it's much more focused on content creators. Now, I didn't know that this was generally available. I just thought it was the usual thing. A few lucky Americans had got their hands on it, and us Brits, as always, were having to wait. And I came across a little video put together by a good friend of mine, Louise Brogan, who I might have given a shout out on the show before. She's a bit of a LinkedIn expert, a bit like Judy that you've just mentioned. She does lots of these little explainer videos. And this little explainer video I'm shouting out today is how to activate this creator profile. So, of course, I watched Louise's video and I thought, I'll just go and check and see whether I've got this. So I went into my profile page and lo and behold, there it is, the button to change my profile into a content creator's profile as opposed to a business one. So I switched it on and I found out that I've apparently got about 4,600 followers. And I think a follower is somebody who you are connected with. But sometimes you can be connected with somebody and not follow them. So there is a subtle difference or something like that. So I was actually quite surprised by that I had that many followers. And then I actually quite like the way it does focus in on your content. I'm not sure about the focus on followers. It introduces a sort of ego thing for me, and it's it becomes a vanity metric. I mean, does it matter? I thought we'd all long since passed by this whole I've got more followers than you thing. But anyway, I thought I'd turn it on, and I thought I'd give it a try and see whether it changes the way people interact with me. So Louise, thank you for doing your video, and thank you for prompting me to go and checking out whether I had this creator profile on my LinkedIn account.
Super. So for viewers and listeners, if you are not following or connected with Judy Parsons and with Brogan, do so. If you really are keen to always be kept up to date with what's happening on LinkedIn, they are two great ladies to follow indeed.
So Pascal, we are at that moment in the show when we head into possibly our favourite section, and that, of course, is film marketing. Do you know, Pascal, when I look at really successful films, my heart often sinks when I hear of somebody thinking about remaking it. A really classic film, something like Back to the Future, my heart would sink if somebody said, we're going to remake Back to the Future. And yet, sometimes they do come along and remake an old film, and they do it in such a unique and interesting and new way that it totally blows the original out of the water and really makes you sit up and think, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And The Invisible Man 2020, starring 𝗬𝗓𝗄, to my mind, is one of those films which I would have said, oh, for goodness sake, don't make another version of The Invisible Man. But they made it, and it's so different to the original, and yet it still pays homage to the original that I was literally blown away by it. And actually, my wife and I watched it again last night, Pascal, for the third time.
Wow. Well, we watched it twice with my wife, Denise, but I would agree with you. I mean, if you think about it, I've not read the book, but I'm aware of the H.G. Wells book. I saw a long time ago the 1933 movie. I'm going to say David Rains starring,
yes,
but I could be wrong. Then I saw the TV series with David McCallum. I saw different versions. I even saw the comedy with Chevy Chase, Memoirs of an Invisible Man. To my, super all right. Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon. So, I mean, the list goes on. I mean, it's actually quite impressive. And others that I've never seen in TV series from different nations and different languages. So this is a story that it could come across as a bit tired with who has not seen or heard by The Invisible Man. But the difference here is that the storyline is different. It's not necessarily focused on the Invisible Man and his downfall from just playing pranks to all the way to becoming a murderer that's captured so well. And what I will say is there's some real shocking moments, some real jumpy moments in this film as well.
Yeah, and as I said, we've watched it 3 times, and some of the jump scares have got us all 3 times, even though we knew they were coming. And, it's a combination, isn't it? It's a science fiction film, it's a horror film, and it's nerve-shredding suspense sometimes. I mean, poor old 𝗬𝗓𝗄, she tends to play women in films who just have a really hard time. Pretty much in every film she's in, she's being beaten up or terrorized by somebody. But this lady goes through so much in this film. Great actress, but some of the suspense sequences are absolutely edge of seat stuff. And the thing is, Pascal, because it's called The Invisible Man, and sometimes she's in a room on her own, and even just the name of the film, is there an invisible man in this room with her? Now, I'm sure that early on in the film there isn't, but they make it so well, the angle of the shot, the audio in the shot, the lighting of the shot. You start searching, don't you, for there's got to be somebody in this room. And he's invisible, so you're never going to be able to see him anyway. But you're looking. It just plays with your mind so much. And then, of course, eventually, yes, something happens in the background. There is somebody there. And it's just absolutely incredible the way they keep that nail-biting suspense going.
I think you've got to obviously congratulate the director who also wrote the film, who paid his dues with his friend James Wan. Now, James Wan would be known to many for the Saw franchise, Insidious, and many others. And obviously, the director, I'm looking at my notes quickly, Lee Waldnell, did Upgrade, which is a great movie, action movie, and you can see some of the style of the movement of the camera in Upgrade a lot more, and of course the Invisible Man. But you're right, and in the old movies, it was more the story of the Invisible Man, and the way in which, day after day and week after week, he would start to literally lose his mind. And here we've got the character played by Elisabeth Moss, who essentially is not believed by anybody. She's not believed by her friends, the authorities think that she's essentially recovering from the fact that she was in an abusive relationship, and so on and so forth, and therefore she's not believed. You yourself, kind of to your point, Roger, think, well, maybe she's wrong too. Maybe there isn't anyone until you get the first clue. For me, the moment the movie starts to become like really chilling is when she sat in that room. And I've got to be careful because this is a new movie. People perhaps have not seen it yet, but she sat in that room and she's staring in the chair. Her friend says to her, "Are you okay?" or words to that effect. And she says very, very calmly, but very, very distressed, she says, "I think there is someone sat on that chair." And the camera points to the chair where there's nobody, but maybe there is. And that's when the movie takes, a very, very interesting turn.
Yeah, and as I say, and you're absolutely right, we shouldn't give too much away because, people may not have seen this. It's literally only just come out on Blu-ray and DVD, so please do go and see it if you haven't, and then come back and listen to this part of the show again. But yeah, it is such an original take on an old classic that, I think that they really do need to get the plaudits for this, because it could just have been, they could have dusted off the old, the guy wrapped with bandages, the glasses, the top hat, the long black coat. They didn't do any of that. They completely reinvented it. And it's actually a decent story as well. It's an abusive relationship story, but they've woven in this whole science fiction trope and this whole horror vibe as well. I think it's I've seen it 3 times. Could go and watch it again now because it genuinely is one of those films that bears watching many, many times.
Absolutely, and that's interesting because when we're going to talk about the marketing, there was some concern by the way that the marketing was approached, and in fact, to your point, because you can watch the film more than once, it's so enjoyable, and there's so much to look at. But also, can I just point quickly? The music is very important. I mean, music is important in all movies, but if you're going to do a horror film, then this is a perfect companion with the visuals, kind of what you can see and hear, because the music can also translate a lot more by the emotion of the main characters, but also the impending doom. Another scene, which I don't think will give too much away because I think it's in the trailers, is when she's suspecting that she's essentially being hunted by an invisible man. She suspects who this could be, and therefore she rings the mobile phone number of that suspect and discovers that the mobile phone is in the attic in the house where she's staying. And I think the whole movie is around this idea of an intruder in your own house that you can't see, which is probably calling on some kind of primal fears for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It just is. You can't help but look over your own shoulder in your own house after you've watched this film. So, Pascal, what about the marketing? What do you think about what they did with this?
Well, this is a movie that, like many movies released last year, fell foul of the pandemic and the restrictions. So, if I remind people that the movie was released at the end of February 2020 by Universal Pictures, one of the distributors. This was made in collaboration with the Blumhouse Pictures. Fan of horror film will know that Blumhouse has now become the standard when it comes to getting scared. And then within weeks and days, they had to cancel the theatrical release. And on one hand, what they could have done, Roger, is, like others, is to go, well, never mind, we'll pause now and wait till the end of the pandemic to re-release the movie at the theatres. And what they've done instead is to go online. And they've also, because they had that pleasure in the US where they have much nicer weather than in Edinburgh and Durham, they've also gone for drive-in. So movie released in the end of February for a few weeks, then lockdown measures start, and they go switch directly onto online and drive-in. A very, very interesting decision indeed.
Yeah, and again, there was plenty of trailers, plenty of clips released in advance, but I think that they actually got a few complaints this time, didn't they, by actually giving too much away. Now, certainly some of the trailers that we've discussed recently don't give anything away about the film, but maybe the trailers did give too much away, although the director seemed to think that actually, even though he did blow a few things in the trailer, there's plenty more to see in the actual film. And as I've said, I've seen it 3 times and I see something different every time, so I'm not that bothered about that angle.
It's fascinating, because so the movie went into production in July of 2019. November, that was pretty much finishing post-production. So November saw the release of the first official trailer in the Universal Pictures official YouTube channel. Then it gets copied and pasted, all over the web. Yeah. This was 2.5 minutes, which is rather long. And as you mentioned, Roger, pretty much told the whole story from start to finish. So you understand why and what is happening to the character 𝗬𝗵𝗲, and I'm trying to remember her name in the movie. I'm going to say Cecilia.
Cecilia.
Oh, yeah, right, yes, Cecilia. And you see the conflict, you see some of the scenes we mentioned about. You also get a sense of resolution when she's fighting back. So many people complain online saying, well, what is the point to go and see the movie? But the whole point is, this is not the story you think it is. It's very, very, very clever. Then, of course, February 2020, the second and final trailer is released. A bit longer, different scenes, different angle, all in and around the character and the fact that she's recovering from a abusive relationship, and is shown almost as more as a thriller, whereby it's more her who is mad and people around her trying to support her than the Invisible Man, which I think is very, very clever. And at the same time, which I've seen done before with other films, they sent extract of the films exclusively to some channels on YouTube, which are all about movies. And they also did a IMAX only featurette saying the reason why you're going to enjoy this film on IMAX is all the following. And you've got to feel sorry for the film producers, because within moments, as we explained, they had to forego the theatrical release and go online instead.
Yeah, and again, there was a load of 15-second square videos that they put on the Facebook page, the official website. Actually had some games, didn't it? Wasn't there some sort of game to engage people to look out for references in the film to the original film? Now, I'm actually thinking, did I spot anything? Did you?
Only the main one I've already seen, which is when she's in hospital because her friends, bless them, think she's going crazy. Yeah. There is a man who has been wheeled out of a operation room covered in bandages, which I think was the nod. But they're meant to be others, but I think you have to be an Invisible Man nerd to spot that. But so I think, to your point though, Roger, what they did very, very cleverly is say, well, since we are now releasing this online and you have to pay or rent the film, let's crank up the social media game. So the Facebook page was pretty much launched at the same time as the trailer in November, and then very, very quickly went, we've got to engage the fans. So they, as we recommend, you're right, put the video in square format. There was bits from the film, there was comments from the critics, repurposed and so on and so forth. And the other thing that they did, which I thought was interesting, they also introduced some additional taglines. Each time they put a square video. You've not done this for a while, Roger, but you remember when we did the Die Hard review, you very kindly read, the taglines with that movie voice. So feel free to do so on this occasion. But there was some really, really fun tagline to supplement, obviously, the official one.
Yeah, I think the official one was, what you can't see can't hurt you. Oh, no, what you can't see can hurt you. Mm-hmm. I love that play on words. That's great. But there were so many others. He's hunting her. Nobody's listening. He's invisible. He's not dead. He's dead, isn't he? Behold a new kind of fear. Prepare for the ultimate night in. Uncover the mystery. He's coming for you. It's time for her to... I mean, it just goes on and on. I don't think I've ever seen as many taglines for a film before.
No, so once again, breaking perhaps rules here, but really creating a sense of... Sometimes with social media, people can be forgiven to think that it's done mechanically, that the marketers or the film producers are not behind it fully. And I think with the presence of the additional tagline to accompany each of the little video clips, you get a sense of at least someone is thinking about it, at least someone is trying to entertain me. The one thing they did as well, which I thought was interesting, is so you had the game about can you spot reference to the old movies, but also you could win a Invisible Man activity book, which I have to confess I'm quite intrigued to what that would entail. Blank pages maybe, perhaps not. And all you had to do was to comment and name the director of the very first movie from 1933, so also bringing a bit of nostalgia and inviting the movie fans to interact.
So I'll sort of go right back to the start again here, where I said what I did is that on the whole, I usually shudder when I hear that somebody is going to try and reboot or reimagine a classic film. Because they usually screw it up in some respects, and usually it doesn't add anything to what's gone before. But with this one, they really did change everything. It really was a different approach, a game changer, almost like a complete reinvention. And I really do think that if you haven't seen it, just get out there, get that DVD, put it into your machine, turn the lights down, and prepare to be scared.
Absolutely. For me, as you've said, Roger, everything has worked well for them. Oh, by the way, this will qualify as a low-budget movie in the world of Hollywood. I think they spent in the region of $7 million, which I know is a lot of money. But for filmmaking, it's on the low end of the scale. And what they got in return, not just in terms of the monetary value, but the support from the fans and the reaction from the critics, I think it is great. And back to this idea of making the decision to go ahead, despite the pandemic, with the online streaming and matching the marketing accordingly with, for once, actually an official website that did a good job, because I've been very critical in the past of official websites, and even being daring with doing things like watch party, using Twitter and Facebook with hosted by famous actors and comedians to say, go online, rent The Invisible Man now, and you can react and comment on Twitter as you get scared and as you're jumping through the different scenes.
And I think just to close this off, I'll refer back to my content spotlight. If you remember in my content spotlight, I said that one of the things that we're taught to do at school is not to copy. But of course, you and I know in business that if you see a good idea, copy it, but make it better. Now, sometimes people copy things and don't make it better or make it worse. Here's an example of somebody who said, let's take that incredible concept, copy the concept, but absolutely blow it out of the park. And that's exactly what they did with this. Wow, Pascal, yet another episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast in the can. It's an absolute pleasure, as always, to sit here and talk about marketing with you, talk about films with you. And I hope that everybody watching this and everybody listening to this has enjoyed it as well. Please do let us know what you think. Give us your feedback. Give us your comments. You can comment on the video on the YouTube channel. You can talk to us on LinkedIn. You can talk to us on Twitter. And let us know the sort of films that you'd like us to talk about, and give us your recommendations for any marketing tech and apps. So until next time, please go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Roger Edwards and he was Pascal Fintoni.